Okay, this is Torah for the Nations weekly meeting, and we're so happy you're with us. This is the 14th of the month of April in the year 2019. This is Pesach Sherbow. We got Terry Hayes with us, and now in the meeting room is Thomas, Troy, Carl, and Devorah. We thank you for being with us here. What we do here is we get together once a week. We answer questions. We help each other go through what we're doing and what we're learning. One of the hardest things for any of us to do, and especially people coming out of a deep religious philosophy that somehow they realize it needs to be changed, is how to do it and without causing, I don't know if you guys have ever just dove into an ice cold lake or something and how it just shocks the body. You lose your breath for a minute, and you take a deep breath, and then you start to get warmed up again and warmed up again. And it takes some time, and it takes some understanding of what's going on. And because of our religious upbringing, we seem to think we have to make sure we get everything right away. But you don't. You just have to learn. I remember every morning I say to myself, God wants from me today, he wants from me some progress. Perfection, he wants progress. Hello, Veronica, good to see you. So anyway, we're going to be talking about those things, and we hope that if you see this on the YouTube video that you'll join us at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, USA, next week, live, so we can talk to you. We have a little chat room opened up. You don't want us to see you on camera, you don't have to. If you just want to type questions in, that's okay. Now, the first thing I want to talk about, because I've had a few questions about it, is what do you do when somebody asks you what religion you are, or you're filling out a form, especially in hospitals. I was just talking to Carla. They ask all kinds of questions to make sure they get your beliefs right, so that you're not offended by something they do, and that's good. But what does a Noahide put down? Because Noahide's not a religion. You're walking with God. You know God, you know who he is, and you're walking with him. That's not religion. Those of you that decide that you want to know God, you don't have to have belief in him. You don't have to believe in something unseen. If you know God and you accept him as your Father and your King, then you know he's going to treat you properly, because your own people, your own father, your own mother, you know who they are. You don't have to have faith they exist. They're there, and they're there to take care of you, and they're always there, and they always love you. I have to remind people that everything God created, and I remind myself this too, every single time he created something, he said it was good. He never, ever said anything. Well, he did say something was bad. One thing that I remember, I'm sure there's others in there like idolatry and so forth, but what he created was all good. The first time he used the word bad in the 5 books of Moses was, he said, it's bad for a man to be alone. You have to have a helpmate. And so if that's what he considers bad, well, that's good, because we all want helpmates. You all want to get married, and most of us want children and all that kind of thing. So we have a God that loves us. He didn't create an eternal hell to punish us, but what father would eternally punish somebody? So what you're doing is you're walking with God. And that's a reality. It's not a religion. It's a simple reality. You've recognized him as the one and only, the creator of the universe. You've accepted his book, the 5 books of Moses, and the Tanakh, the Torah, as his blueprint for the world, how he's going to do things. So he shared with you what he's going to do. He shared with you through the 5 books of Moses how the world's going to be built and how everything's going to be done. And it's easy to understand and hard to understand. It isn't a religion. It's just walking with him. It's your reality. It's my reality. It's the horse's reality. It's everybody's reality. He created all of us. So it's not a religion. You don't have to refer to yourself as being part of a religion. And you never have to tell anybody you believe in God, because you're going to know who God is. You're going to know who he is, just like your mother and your father, just like you know who we are here as we sit here and talk. You know he exists. You know he's there. I don't have to have faith that something unseen exists. You know he exists. How do you know he exists? You look at a flower, a butterfly, your next door neighbor, your husband, your wife, your kids. He's created all of that for us. He's a loving God. So when someone asks me, do I believe in God? I say, no, I know him. When somebody says, do I have faith in God? I say, yes, I have faith. I have faith that he's going to do the things he said he was going to do for me. Not faith that he exists, because I know he exists. And he does things for people. And he does them through prayer. And I guess we'll have to do a program about prayer. It'll take about 3 minutes. Prayer is your conversation with him your whole life. Talk to him. He's your dad. Talk to him. He's your king. If you know there's something he doesn't want done, we don't do it. Now, looking at the chat room, the Tovia Singer has been around for decades. Love his work. I've learned so much from him. And it's true. I learned also from Tovia Singer and some things, and I've studied like he has, although I don't know it. I can't bring it up to memory so quick as he can, but I spent 12 years, 14 years studying that part of the Bible, or that part of what they call the Bible, so I could help people and understand people and talk to them about people. But the thing here is I'm not a debater, and I'm not really big on debating. I won't debate people, because the definition of a debate, it's like a war. I present my points, you present yours. You got to convince me I'm wrong. I got to convince you you're wrong. There has to be a winner and a loser. And now, if you're watching 2 people debate, okay, some things will come up that may help you think about things, yes. But when you debate with somebody, they're really not listening to what you're saying. They're thinking up how to answer you for what you said before. So their head's way up here thinking about something else. They're not taking in what you're saying to them. They're more like, oh, I'm going to block it with this and block it with that and block it with that. And so I personally got away from the debates. Tovia Singer does a good job of explaining to people what things are, and it's needed. It's a job that's needed. I'm glad he's there doing it, because he's good at it. And as the chief rabbi of Jakarta, he also has a standing amongst clergymen of other religions. So it's good. Now, you put in allergies. Shrimp, pork, if you don't eat these things, is a Noahide. Telling them you're allergic to shrimp will throw up flags for certain medical tests that use contrast. I don't know about that, but I'm not in the medical field, so I don't know that. But you can just eat what you want. And it doesn't make any difference. God doesn't say, look, if somebody lives where all they can do is catch shrimp all day long to eat, that's what they're going to do. If somebody lives where there's a wild boar running around, that's what they're going to eat. And it's not a sin. Probably won't find any Jews there, but it's not a sin. Actually, the world's getting to the place where there isn't many places without a Jew anymore, because Chabad's sending people out all over the world doing things. Divorce says, people believe what they want to believe. I was waiting for a bus at the store, and a complete stranger came up to me trying to tell me about saving my soul to believe in Jesus. Wrong place, wrong time. I smiled and walked away. Yes, I am Jewish. Yep, Noahides don't have to. That's true. Now, when someone asks you religion, you have to put on the bottom line of a form. Don't be embarrassed to say none. See, none doesn't mean you're an atheist. An atheist is a religion also. And he has an idol, the person himself. He's decided God doesn't exist. Or agnostic wants somebody to prove that God exists. Well, I don't need proof. I know. And so you can use the word none. And there are times when I feel like just writing in none on I've had a few forms that I had to fill out, not here in Israel, because I have citizenship here, and it's in my ID that I'm Jewish. So it's okay to not have a religion. There's nothing wrong with it.
It took me a few years to come to that realization. And once I came to a deeper understanding in my thoughts of the Noahide path, I came to that understanding of it's not a religion. Like I wrote down what you said because it's really good. Walking with God is reality, not a religion. And I thought that's puts into words my own thoughts. And I find personally for me, it's one of the beauty points of living as a Noahide. Because as long as, to me, especially in the Christian South that I live in, where religion is a major part of the society, I don't have to worry with that anymore. I don't have to deal with that. It's like another burden. It's another burden that was lifted once I come to the Noahide laws. There's so much when I said yes to Hashem about the Noahide laws. It's just like he just yanked all this stuff off me to where all I got to deal is with him.
Right.
And I love it. It's one of my favorite parts of the Noahide laws.
Let me tell you something else that some people don't realize. The word God is allowed. When we have our studies, and when I do some teachings at the shul, at the synagogue, I always use the word God in English. The Hebrew words for him we're not allowed to use, but the word God in English is okay. Now, the reason some people write it with a dash in the middle, G-D, this is a custom that we started because we are not supposed to in any way defame God. And if we write it out G-O-D and then you wrinkle it up and throw it in the trash, what have you just done? But if you go G-D and you throw it in the trash, what have you done? To us, it's just, I know it sounds silly, but it's just it's one of the technicalities. But you can use Hashem if you want, or you just use God. It's okay. Yeah,
I just kind of bounce back and forth because I read so much, and of course, 6 years of studying.
Yeah,
it's become part of my vocabulary. And when I'm with people that know the term, I have more of a tendency to use it. But when I'm in my writings, you'll very rarely. The only time you'll see me quote it or use it will be in a quote where somebody else has used it. But most time I translate it out to God. But I know it just kind of, it's because it's part of my vocabulary when I'm with people that you're comfortable with, that understand your terminologies.
Right.
It comes out.
I know you probably felt this way when you were studying for conversion, but they'd use like 6 words in English and 2 words in Hebrew and another 10 in English, and then you get lost because those 2 Hebrew words, why'd they throw them in there even, to somebody who doesn't understand Hebrew?
the translated Hebrew words a lot of times that were used didn't bother me as much as you'll have a full English sentence, and then there's a Hebrew word in Hebrew thrown in without the like slash explanation. And so I'm looking, okay, why is that word really in there? So then I have to contact somebody and go, okay, I got an idea of what it means, but I want to make sure.
Before I go on to this, I'm going to just share something with you guys on a personal basis. For me, since I have received this work to do that I do with the Noahides and working with people from all religions and bringing them in, I've noticed, unfortunately, that people, I don't care if they're coming from Christianity or from Islam or whatever religion they're coming to, everything we say or everything I teach, they want to hook back to what they've learned so far, and they want to hook back to what they've thought so far. And the best thing for everybody to do, and just a little hint, is disconnect from that. In other words, don't let that thought come up, or stop it if it starts to come up, because what you're learning about who really truly God is has nothing to do with what you learned in the past. Absolutely nothing. It's a whole brand new thing you're learning. This Chinese boy asked me today, he's not a boy, a young man, doing his work in Nazareth Hospital as an intern. He says, how do you disconnect from that stuff? How do you, when you hear something, how do you block these other thoughts that come in your mind that you've learned from your parents and you've learned from the people that your parents have put in charge of your teaching growing up? And it's a hard thing to do. It's very hard. It's automatic. You guys hear something, I hear something, and I react automatically to it based on the cultural way I was brought up. And so we have to be aware that we do that type of thing. We have to be aware that our thinking goes and our brain is wired in such a way that it was wired by our experiences and our teachings that we've had up until this point in our lives. And it's an automatic thing. Your brain doesn't have to think about it anymore. It hears something, it reacts a certain way. Automatic. But it doesn't have to. You know, that's like, has anybody ever heard about Pavlov and his dogs? This is a Russian guy, way back when. He was trying to show that you can create instincts in animals, to show that instincts can be created in us. And he would feed his dogs, and every time he fed his dogs, he would ring a bell. And they would eat. Then he would ring the bell and he wouldn't bring any food, and the dogs would start drooling. Their mouths would just automatically start drooling, wanting the food already, just because they heard the bell. And what happens is the brain gets trained to think in a certain way. And so because it is, the animal part of you and the animal mind part of you operates in a certain way. And, you know, what's the first thing somebody says when you're walking away from Christianity? Oh, you're going to hell. First thing they say. And they're scared to death for you. They're afraid you're just going to burn up in hell. But it's what they were brought up with and what they were taught. It's very hard to unwire your brain. You really have to work at it. And that's why we teach people that the best thing to do, you know, everybody's heard the story about the boy that came to the teacher and said, you know, teach me the Torah. And so he served him some tea, and he started pouring the tea into the cup of the boy and talking to the boy. And all of a sudden the boy says, oh, the tea's not going in the cup. It's going all over the place. The teacher put down the teapot. I'm sure you all heard it before. I just don't remember. I'm sure you did. But The teacher says that's your first lesson, and walked away. You got to think about it. If the teacher, you're coming to a teacher and asking for information, if your head is so full with what you already know and you leave it there, new stuff can't come in. It's just real simple. So you have to be willing to take that. You know, people don't understand. Let's say someone comes and wants to know about being a Noahide, and we tell them. And they just say, nah, I'm not going to do that because I know it's bad, and da-da-da-da, because I'm a this and I'm a that. They don't know that it won't hurt them to empty their head a little bit and learn, because they can always go back to the way they were. They're not risking anything except finding out the truth. They're not converting. They're not doing anything. They're just listening to some information. And if the information, in the end, they feel is not for them, they can go back to the way they were, whatever religion they come from. They're not going to miss anything. Nothing's going to happen to them because they did this. So sometimes I'll just tell people that. What do you got to lose? Listen, think about it. Think about it before you just decide not to do it at all. Some people it works with, some people it doesn't. But we just got to, those of us together here, we know that we're on the right path. You guys, you know, the old saying, the truth will set you free. Well, how free it is when you know who God really is. You can just lift off your shoulders. Look, a Jew has to take on what we call the all of Torah. What is the all? It's the yoke. Comes across our neck, and we're carrying this big thing around, and we have to do all these 613 things. And everybody says, oh, how terrible. Well, it's not, because it's actually very freeing. It puts a direct, here's what you do and here's what you don't do. But if you get it wrong, it's okay. You're going to get it corrected. You'll correct it. We don't live with fear of being struck by lightning. We don't live with fear of hailstone. What do they call them? The brimstone falling out of the sky. And we don't live with those things. We don't have to. We know who God is. We know He's loving. We know He's going to take care of us. There's such a thing as divine providence. And the more you allow yourself to know God, the more you will see divine providence around you. This is how He takes care of you. Not by poof, here's 6 numbers for the lottery ticket or the Powerball or whatever it is. But He's going to take care of you because there's a promise He makes to everything living thing He created. He created you, and He created your needs, and He's going to cover your needs for you. Doesn't mean you might not live in a $2 million mansion. You might not be driving a $50,000 car. He's going to take care of your needs. You're going to have your food. You're going to have what you need. And whether you realize it or not, He's doing it for you every day, even though you don't recognize Him. But when you start seeing it, it just makes your trust in Him and your faith that He's going to take care of you even stronger. You know, all of us as who were growing up and we were kids, we did some shtick, and we did this and we did that. We got in trouble here and there. And we got in trouble with our parents once in a while. I mean, that's life. That's growing up. But did they ever hold it against us our whole lives or something? We might have gotten punished. Okay. It was a learning thing. But we always ended up being treated with love, for the most part. I know there are exceptions to everything I'm saying. So if you come up with an exception, I ask you to think about that thing, see if it wasn't for your good anyway. Because I looked at the way I was brought up, even though I was brought up Jewish, there were things during my life that, boy, I just was so angry at my father about. But then I realized, as I get older, everything he did was for my benefit, not for his benefit. all the times he got angry with me, and all the times he did these things. I wasn't ready to learn yet. Now I am. Marinella, how you doing? So, I covered that, talked a little bit longer than I was going to talk about it. But let's back to what we opened with is if somebody asks you what religion you are, you aren't any religion. I'm not a religion. I belong to a family that has a code of how to do things. But I'm certainly not I may religiously do my prayers every day, because religiously in English means doing them properly all the time. I'll go with that. Is it religion? No. I pass on that. Okay, before we go anywhere here, does anybody have anything that they want to talk about, any questions they have right now to bring up, post them in the chat room, or guys, Terry?
Marinella saying yes, she has a question. You typed in Pharaoh's hearts.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. That's one of the things I'm talking about today, as we're coming up to Passover. And Passover, the Exodus from Egypt. And do you know that this is a whole setup, this whole thing? The whole thing that happened was a setup by God. Now, I think I mentioned something about it last week. It was his debut to the whole world. He went from being God watching over one little family to God saying, okay, world, here I am. Come on and join me. Look at me. I'm the strongest. And Jethro agreed with him. And Jethro in English agreed with him. But what it is here, and I'm going to read what the, it looks like I got a lot of light in this room. I'm sitting here in the dark. I don't know where the light's coming from. I'm going to try to, this comes from a direct writings of the Rebbe. Actually, not a writing, but an oral teaching he gave that somebody wrote down. This first sentence is so important. Listen to this. One of the most striking features of the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt was their demonstration of faith in the providence of God. Not faith in God, but faith that he is divinely watching over and taking care of things. Not faith in him, but faith that he's doing, because he's a God that loves us. Oh, I see one. Okay. I don't look like I'm looking at the camera, but I am. Let me say this again. One of the most striking features of the exodus of the Israelites from Egypt was their demonstration of faith in the providence of God. Faith in what he is doing, not faith in him. Consider the circumstances. An entire nation, men, women, and children, numbering several million, willingly left a well-settled and prosperous country, a country where pagan values had already left their impression on them, and to venture on a long and dangerous journey without provisions, but with absolute reliance on the word of God as spoken by Moses. They left there with wealth, but they lived in their flax, but they didn't take wheat, they didn't take food with them, they didn't take anything. They had a little bit of bread that never rose. It just, it was like wafers, crackers. They didn't know where they were going to get their next meal. They didn't know where they were going to get their water. They were living in one of the nicest places in Egypt, in Goshen, and they grew their food there. They had food. Yes, they were slaves. That's terrible. But they went from having that, what they had, to absolutely zero nothing. You're out in the desert. Where are you gonna buy your next meal from? No McDonald's and no supermarkets or anything. There's nothing in the middle of the deserts. So, wait a minute. Okay, yeah. What is more, they did not follow the familiar and easy route through the land of the Philistines, which, although it involved the risk of war, it was far more attractive than the prospect of crossing a vast and desolate desert. In war, there's a chance of victory. In defeat, there's a chance of escape. But in the desert, without food or water, nature allows no chance of survival. Yet they followed the route disregarding rationality and trusting in the Word of God. They had total trust and faith in God that it's okay. We're going to be there. Something will happen. He'll take care of us. He's supposed to take care of us. So we're not going to take the easy way out. We're going to take the tough way. And we're going to do it because that's what he wants us to do. The facts are more remarkable still. The Israelites had spent 210 years in Egypt, a highly agricultural country where the nomadic life was mistrusted, where the soil was fertile and irrigated by the Nile, whatever the caprices of the climate were, and they forsook all the security of the natural order of things. They stepped out of the natural order of what was going on there. Why did they do so? This question is echoed in every generation. The secular world and the Jew who was strayed from the Jewish truth asked the practicing Jew, you live like us in a materialistic world. You belong to a competitive society. You too face the struggle for economic survival. How can you exempt yourself from its values? How can you adhere to a code of precepts that burden your life and restrict your actions at every turn? Isn't that what they tell us? We go by the Old Testament. We go by the old stuff. We're not paying attention to how things move forward and how the society moves. Unfortunately, we had Jews back in every society that did that, during the Greeks, during the Romans, during the Egyptians. We had people are people, you know, and they have what they have, and they say it's good, and so I'm going to just continue on with this other stuff, the material stuff. The answer is in the Exodus from Egypt to this question. Back then, when the Jews responded to the call of God, disregarding what seemed reasonable at the time, breaking with the values of their Egyptian environment, it transpired that the path they took was the path of true happiness. They didn't know what was going to happen. They faithfully knew that God was going to faithfully take care of them. They weren't worried about, did I have the nicest car and the nicest clothes, or did I have food on my table every time? I want to have my relationship with God, and that walk with God is reality. And this is reality. It's tough to get started. It was really tough for the Jews to get started. The Noahide laws were there. Abraham could have said, oh, I'll just do the 7, that's it. I don't want anything more than that. He could have. And so could have every Jew since then said that. But we have Abraham and Sarah, and we have Isaac, and we have everybody right up through Jethro and Rahab and Ruth and all these people that they saw the reality of the true situation and walked away from the fleshly part of life. They came into a relationship with God because they felt it was more important to have a relationship with God, the one true God, than to believe things. Don't forget, Ruth was Midianite. They had umpteen gods. Rahab lived in Jericho. They had all kinds of gods over there in Jericho. Anyway, when the Jews responded to the call of God, disregarding what seemed reasonable at the time, the breaking with the values of their Egyptian environment, it transpired that the path they took was a path of true happiness, spiritually, in receiving the Torah and becoming God's chosen people. Materially, and reaching the promised land flowing with milk and honey. It is so today and always through the Torah. And it's called the Torah Chaim, the law of life. When the mitzvot, the Jew attaches himself, with mitzvot, Jew attaches himself to the Creator and frees himself from all natural limitations. This is the way of happiness in the spirit and in the material world. Now, this is true for everybody. This isn't true just for the Jew. There were people that came out of Egypt, some good people, some not so good. And they came out and some started doing mitzvot, following the Torah it was given as we learned it and how we've learned to do it over the years. And they realized that the Torah is the tree of life. There is no other life except from Torah. It gives the true life. It gives you freedom in your own life. It tells you how to make your decisions, how to think. And it's okay with me because it shows you, since we were created in the image of God, how he thinks and how he wants us to act and how he wants us to respect him. Now, here's the problem. Today, we're 3,300 years away from that occurrence that happened. 4 more days is the 14th of Adar. 5 more days is the 15th. That night, 6 days, I'm sorry. Today's only the 9th. What we do is we're going to, the 9th of the Adar, the 9th of the month of spring, the head of the months. And we're going to sit down and do a Passover Seder that recounts how God freed us from the bonds that we had in Egypt. Now, there's a huge lesson in this thing that happened coming out of Egypt 3,300 years ago. And it still pertains today to each and every one of us. Each one of us has within us the voice of Moses and the voice of Pharaoh. Just like Moses walking up in front of the Pharaoh and saying, let my people go, and then Pharaoh said, okay, you can go, and then changing his mind and then do this, and I'm not going to do this, and all these other things. We have that in our own minds. Mitzrayim means a choking point or a narrow point or a dividing point. And all of us are sitting here right now, and we have those things going on in our heads right now. Do I do this? Should I not do this? You have Moses saying, yeah, come on, you know you got to do this, and this is the right way to do it. And then you got Pharaoh saying, just stick around, get yourself a new fishing boat, go fishing. Don't worry about all this other stuff. So, and what's wrong with that? Come on. That's where I love to be. out on the river, out on Chesapeake Bay where I grew up. I'd love to be out there fishing. So why bother with all this other stuff? Well, I can still go fishing, by the way, any day but Shabbat. But why bother with the other stuff? Well, the other stuff is what God wants from us. He wants us to follow what he says to do, and it's not hard. Be kind to others, be kind to animals, be faithful in relationships. Don't steal, don't lie, what's the big deal? We all got it in us, we can all do it. But one thing we got to get rid of is greed, and we have to get rid of the thinking of ourselves. Well, I don't think I'm going to do that today. I think I'm going to go kick back and grab me a couple of beers and go fishing. Or I'm going to do something else, whatever women might do for I saw a thing that said that people like many times, women like many times have themselves a bubble bath, a hot bubble bath, a little glass of wine, and some chocolates. But what is that? Nothing but an escape. What is fishing but an escape? I know what it is. I did it for many years. I loved it, but I got so tied up in the fishing. Then I found the key when I moved to Israel. I used to sit on the Mediterranean, go fishing, and in between bites, I would pray. And I just wait for, I felt like I had to be talking to God. Anyway, that's my own personal thing. You have Pharaoh in you, and you have Moses in you, and you got to decide which one you're going to follow. And Moses usually maybe a little bit harder way, mentally and sometimes physically, but in the end, it's the right way to do it. The English translation has the right meaning. God turned Pharaoh's heart hard. Yeah, that's a good question, actually. God doesn't force anybody to have a hard heart. So God didn't say, okay, Pharaoh, you have a hard heart. But God can harden someone's heart. Let me tell you how. Every one of you have known somebody in your life, at work, at school, somewhere, that just when that person talked to you, it kind of aggravated you. There was just something wrong somewhere. You felt you didn't want to talk to that person. Whenever they came around you, you preferred not to be around them. You preferred not to talk to them. And if that person would come up and start a conversation with you, you get a harder feeling in your heart for that person. You wouldn't start being friends with them. You get a harder feeling. Go away. I'm going away. Or don't bother me right now, or something like that. And everybody, I don't know anybody that hasn't had that experience in their life. And this is what Pharaoh was going through. And God said, okay, you want a hard heart? I'll give you a hard heart. And so he kept putting things in front of Pharaoh that he knew were going to make Pharaoh angry. So every time Pharaoh got angry, his heart hardened more. So who hardened his heart? God gave him 10 chances, 10, to change his mind. Not one, 10. Each one was a test. And the Pharaoh took the first 3 or 4 very logically. Oh, yeah, well, this could happen anyway, and my guys can do this and whatever and whatever. He didn't get the point. Abraham had 10 tests. Moses had 10 tests in the desert. The Jewish people had 10 tests. God doesn't say, do what I tell you or I'm going to smite you. He doesn't say that. He gives people chance after chance after chance after chance after chance. The very last thing that happened was the biggest chance of all. Most people don't know this, but the actual god of Egypt was a ram or a lamb, male, female. And God told Israel, take a lamb into your home 4 days earlier, tie it to the bedpost, and then bring it out on the 14th of Nisan. And it's not a sacrifice, you understand. He said, butcher it, essentially, catch the blood in a basin, take the animal and roast it. Don't boil it, don't oven fry it, just roast it and eat it. And take the blood and put it on the doorpost of the house and across the top. First of all, when you put blood on anything, 2 sides and across the top closed, it makes the Hebrew letter chet, which stands for chaim, for life. Second of all, the only people that really were truly saved by that were the firstborn of each family. Because if the angel destroyer had come across that house that didn't have this blood on it, only the firstborn inside would die, not everybody else. But about the second day that all these lambs had disappeared. Can you imagine all these people and all these houses, and all of a sudden a whole bunch of lambs disappeared inside homes. And the people of Egypt came, hey, what are you guys doing? What are you taking a lamb inside your house for? And they told them exactly why it was. That God told them to do this, and in 4 days the destroyer was going to come and kill all the firstborn. They had fair warning. And so what happened was some of the firstborn and some of the families got together and they went to Pharaoh. And they told him, look, let these people go already. I mean, look, haven't you seen enough already? Look at all the damage that's been done by this God. Let them go. Pharaoh said, no, I am the God. Nobody's better than me. And it actually started a civil war in Egypt, where many Egyptians died at the hand of the firstborn of Egypt. So, but who hardened whose heart here? God didn't say, okay, Pharaoh, I'm hardening your heart. He just put another test in front of him. It was Pharaoh's choice to harden his heart, or he could have softened his heart. He could have let him go first time, second time, third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time, seventh time, eighth time. He could have let him go. But he didn't. Go ahead, Terry.
I mean, on that particular part of the story, I hadn't really dealt a lot of thoughts on that, but the way you're describing this is very interesting. God hardened, I'm just quoting the English, God hardened Pharaoh's heart through causing Pharaoh to make a choice.
Right.
And technically, Pharaoh hardened his own heart because he made the wrong choices. But the way God put, like we know in the Torah, I place before you life and death, choose life. And really, that's what he was doing with Pharaoh. He was putting choices. He did Adam that way. He's done all of us that way. He puts a choice in front of us, and our choice determines whether our heart is softened or hardened.
Exactly.
It's ultimately on us. That's really good stuff.
Well, let me explain. When you read the 5 books of Moses and you read the prophets, there's the simple story on top. Instead of going through all this explanation, if everything in the Torah was explained in this way, Moses would have needed a tractor trailer to bring stuff down off the hill. So everything's done in a simple manner, explained in simple terms, and then God gave us the inquisitiveness to go in deeper and know there's something deeper there. There's something more than what meets the eye here. Because God isn't a vindictive God. God is a loving God. God's not going to make somebody bad. So we have to stop and think a little bit and say, how could this possibly have happened? And I use this example all the time, but people say to me, if there was a God to all these people, we wouldn't have all these sick people in the world dying, the kids dying of malnutrition and everything else. And you think God's killing these people? You think God is having these children die of malnutrition? See, he's looking at the simple. But when you look down deep into it, it's not God at all doing this. It's our choices that are doing this.
Well, it's like in my own personal life over the last few years, as I've grown in my studies of the 7 Noahide laws. I always say the laws gave me a new human and world view. But it's not, it is the laws, but by what you're saying here, and I'm grasping this, sometimes I have a hard time putting it in my words, but because I chose to receive the teaching and the understanding of the laws, that choice of understanding the laws for the way they were created is what changed and softened my heart in my worldview and in my human view, instead of having a hard heart toward society, toward false religion. I've softened in that area, not because I've become lax or liberal, but I'm allowing choosing the commandments in their understandings has allowed me to soften my look at humanity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you realize that there is no one that's intrinsically bad, no matter what they do, they're created good, then when you look at someone, no matter how bad they are, you're supposed to find the good in them. And you can't do that with a hard heart. Now, it doesn't excuse what they did.
No, exactly.
Yeah, but it's still that they have some good in them somewhere.
You just learn not to use the Torah or the instructions of God like a baseball bat, hit somebody over the head with them.
Do you know how many laws that every human being obeys every day that they don't even think about? We got the law of gravity God created, right? Every law that we can think of, God created. Every law of nature He created. When we see a caterpillar turn into a butterfly, that's a law that God created. That caterpillar is going to turn into that particular butterfly with that color pattern on its wings, and not into something else. The whole universe moves in tune with God's laws. We're the only creature that doesn't. Well, not all of us, but most of human beings do not move in. Look, do you know that they had to close the Galapagos Islands? Do you know where they are? They're in the middle of nowhere in the Pacific. They don't even allow visitors in there. Why? You know these big dragons that live on the Galapagos? They're dying. Why? Plastic pollution. They picked up tons of plastic trash off that island in the last couple of months. Why? Because we throw it out in the garbage here and it ends up down there in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. There are laws to everything, and when we violate one of the laws, or two or three or four, we're destroying what God put together. We live by His laws every day. We live by the laws of the countries we live in every day. Stop at a stop sign, yield, only go 55, only go 100, whatever's written on the sign. We live by laws every day. Somehow people think they don't have to live by any law when it comes to relating to God, the creator of all things. You get a check at the end of the week or at the end of the month for working. Do you know it's a law? It's a law that God made. God gives you a job and He makes sure you get paid for it. Unless somebody steps in and grabs the paycheck in the middle. We say, oh, look what I made this week. Oh, I made myself $100 this week. You think? It was God guiding you and getting you in that job and giving the owner the money to give you. But everything belongs to God anyway. When you give money, throughout my life, I've loaned money to people. And I always do one thing when I give somebody a loan. I say to myself, I hope I never need this money back. Pay me, don't pay me, that's their business. But because one guy didn't pay me, I can't not give to the next guy. Because it doesn't belong to me anyway. I have it because God opened a doorway that put it in my hands. So if somebody in real need comes to me and they need a loan, or if they just need money, if I have, I give. If I don't have, I can't. It's one of God's laws that we do this. Do you know that there would have been no flood if people had just treated each other kindly before Noah? That's all He wanted from people. it is so easy to walk with him. It's unbelievable. And it frees you from all the man-made stuff that people try to stuff down your throat, telling you where you were born bad, you're worthless, you got to do this and you got to do that. These things don't exist in God's world. There isn't even a Hebrew word for the word sin. What is translated to sin is the Hebrew word chet. Chet is actually an arrow. And what we say by it is kind of a shorthand. You want to hit a target that's in front of you. Take your bow, you put the arrow in it, you fire it at that bullseye. And it hits it or it misses it. If you miss the mark, we call it a het. If I want to get better, I got to do it. Next time I have to hit the bullseye that God wants and do what he wants. But he's not going to penalize me for not getting it right first time or second time or third time, as long as I'm working on making it right. You know, back in the day, there was when they did a lot of bow hunting before there was guns and all that kind of stuff, rifles. There was a guy who lived in a little village. He decided he was going to be the absolute best, #1 best archer that could possibly be. And he practiced day and night. And he practiced day and night. And he'd go out in the woods and he'd practice and he'd practice. He practiced for years. He was pretty darn good. And one day he's walking in the woods and he goes by a tree. There's an arrow right in the middle of the bullseye. He goes a little further. There's another one right in the middle of the bullseye. He sees 5 or 6 of them. He says, man, I got to find this archer. I got to find out. He gets it every time, right smack dab in the middle. And he hunts him down, takes him a couple of days. He comes to the archer, and he says, you know what? I need to learn from you. I'm an archer also, but I can't hit like you do. Boy, every time, bullseye, bullseye, bullseye. And the archer says, you want a bullseye every time? Let me show you how I do it. The archer shot at a tree, walked over with his paint, and drew the bullseye. This is what a lot of people do with life. This is what a lot of people do with life. And this young man that was trying to be the best archer in the world learned from a guy that always got bullseyes. The way you do it is just shoot the arrow, then put the bullseye. In other words, I'm going to do what I want to do, and then I'll tell you, yeah, it's right. It's okay to do it.
I've got an interesting kind of archery story myself. It's kind of a combination of 2 stories. Years ago, when my eldest
I'm listening, Terry. I'm listening.
Years ago, when my youngest daughter, when my eldest daughter was still young before my second daughter was born, I got into archery. I had a neighbor who was an archery state champ here in Tennessee. And so he was, we lived in a place where we could set up targets, and he was teaching us some archery. And so I got into it. I had to lay my bow down. Archery became my drug. Biggest fight my wife and I ever got into was one day I picked my bow up to go out and not go with her somewhere. So I had to put it down because it's very, very addictive to me. And so I started watching videos. And I watched this video one time, the most deadliest hunter, which I never got to go hunting with my bow. I just never really wanted to, because you could always make a mistake and hurt an animal if you're not really, really good. But this video is the most dangerous hunter in the woods is a recurve archers. Everybody knows what a recurve is. It's just the bow and the string, not the compound with all the wheels. I was a compound shooter, but I always wanted to learn the recurve. And I watched this video. This guy was a recurve master, one of the best shooters in the entire world. And I showed him in some woods, and some guys on the other side of this mountain drove some deer toward him. And he's standing next to a tree, And this deer comes running through the woods. We're talking about limbs, trees, everything. And there's a tree laying on the ground, and this deer jumps over, and he's standing there, and he goes like that, one motion. He didn't pull, aim, nothing. Bam! 50 yards out, hits that deer in the heart in one motion. And so I was thinking about this as he was sharing this story about, in a way, you know, with the sin is actually, like you said, it's the arrow. It's actually it's an action part of the arrow, whether you're hitting the mark or missing the mark. And this guy was hitting the mark without even thinking about it. And so I got to thinking about this story is not that he wasn't thinking about it, but he had trained his mind. It's like us learning and studying the 7 laws. We're training our mind to hit that mark. And it's just, that's just what was relating to me. And then a second story dealing with archery, a guy that used to live here, he made recurves from wood, handmade, beautiful. We had a men's group one day, went up to his house up in the mountains, and we got to choose these handmade bows, which was amazing. They were amazing things. I'd never shot a recurve, and so he had these targets out there. So I'm used to my compound with sights on it, and I'm trying to aim it, and I let go of the arrow, and it zips out through the woods. I didn't even bounce off the target. Missed it. I mean, full blown. He says, you're too busy aiming. He said, look at the target with your eyes and put the arrow where your eyes see. And I'm like, really? I'm not going to aim. I'm just going to shoot what I'm looking at with my eyes without aiming. And I said, okay, picked up the bow. Next time I just looked at the target. I picked it up and done that. And I missed the bullseye by about that much. Mm-hmm. And so that's teaching me about what Pesach's saying here, and what I'm using in my past experience in this issue with the bow is we study these 7 laws. We see what God wants us to do, and that's our aim.
Exactly.
That's our aim. We're using our eyes to see the words of God. We're using our mind to know what these words are saying, and we're able to get closer at hitting the target without all this, well, I've got to aim and try to, I mean, aiming is important, but it's interesting that sin and the law comes back down to the bow and arrow.
Yeah.
Just a lot of lesson there for me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the word sin, it essentially means arrow. You're pointing it, you're shooting it, and you miss the mark. But God says, it's okay, you'll do better next time. And if you want the proof of that, go see what he says to Cain when he refused Cain's offering in the very first offering that was given, Cain and Abel. He says, you know, I see it on your face. And sin, chet, the absolute missing of the mark, is in your eyes, but you don't have to choose that way if you don't want to.
Wow. This is all really good stuff here.
Yeah. It's people don't realize what a merciful and kind God our Creator is. Do you know, we say every morning, Baruch Shamar V'zayah, blessed is he who spoke and it was. Now, remember something about the spoken word. It's alive. When you speak out something, it's alive. It can hurt somebody. It can make somebody feel good. It can go to somebody else and come back around to the person it was spoken about, and it can embarrass them, it can destroy their reputation. You do all kinds of bad things. Also, when you speak in truth, that goes out. It never dies. So if God stopped speaking, Baruch, God, he spoke and it was. If he stopped speaking, we wouldn't be. Think about it. In his mercy, we're here. The universe is here. The black holes that I just got pictures of are here. the moon that just got a crash landing on by the Israeli. It's all here, but it's all part of his creation. If he were to stop for 1 minute speaking, everything would just snuff out and there'd be nothing again, but he'd still be here and he wouldn't have changed one bit. An example of this is real simple. Think all the time. They have thoughts. Thoughts are very hard to put into words. What you're thinking will never get into words, only approximately. But when you think, let's say you're thinking, you create a character in your mind. You know, Luke Skywalker, you create it in your mind. And you're thinking about this guy, Luke Skywalker, in your mind. What happens the minute you stop thinking about Luke Skywalker in your mind? Hello, he doesn't exist anymore. So here, God didn't need to do this. Only he knows why he did it. But here we are. And he did it in a loving, kind way. And he wants to live with us. He tells us that. I want to be with you. I want to live within you, he actually says. I want you to build me a world where I can come and be with the world and be with you. Now, he's with you right now. Whether you invited him or didn't invite him, he's part of you. There's a part of you that's eternal, and he's there. And he wants you simply to turn around to him and say, hello, Father, hello, King. We have a problem with accepting kingship today. We don't know what it is to put ourselves in front of a person that has total control over your life and death. I mean, in the Arab countries, they do. In Saudi Arabia, they do. In Jordan, they do. In Syria, they do. Because they have kingships, they're monarchies. They don't call them that, but that's what they are. And the rulers of the countries are called kings. In Iran, Persia, they keep switching between, I don't know, imam and whatever. The point is, these people in these Middle Eastern countries, when you walk into a room with them, they can just look at you and say, go kill this guy, and boom, he's dead. God could do that to any one of us, but he doesn't. He allows us to live our lives for us to make the decision what's going to happen to ourselves. And we can do it knowing he created us not in sin, not as bad people, but as good people, each and every one of us. No matter where you are, no matter where you go, no matter what room you're in, no matter how alone you think you are, he's right there with you, beside you. No matter how deep you go to. There's an old Kingston Trio song. Guy was out drinking one night, and he got so drunk that he couldn't walk, and he laid down in the gutter. And as he turned over to see who was laying next to him, it was a pig there. He says, and the pig got up and walked away from me. Right down there in the gutter, lower than the pigs were and what they rolled around in, God was right there with that person. And God is not a person that does not forgive. He forgives everything. He doesn't need a sacrifice. He doesn't need somebody to do it for you. He just wants you to turn around to him and say, okay, I'm here. Teach me so I can do what you want me to do. And you know what? It's not that hard. You're going to be living the same lives you're living now. It's just going to be a pleasanter, or more pleasant, I guess is the way to say it, life. When something happens to you and you run into a problem, whether it's a problem with, I don't know, financially or health or whatever, yeah, they're a problem. But if you face it, that God is doing something good, that's the test, like he did with Pharaoh. So if you're going through something, just say, okay, God, I'm getting a message here. I'll get through it. I trust you and I have total faith that you're going to help me through it. Because you know he exists and you're talking to him and he knows you're talking directly to him. And he'll help you through anything. From personal experience, I can say that. Not because I'm Jewish, because I'm a human being. Because 2 times in my life when I asked him for help, I was not following the proper path that he wanted for a Jew. And he helped me both times when I really, really was desperate for help. And he there's no reason why he should have, but he did it. Why? Because he's a loving God. And he can do it with everybody. We all go through problems. We go through problems in relationships. We go with problems in our daily lives. We fall down. We hurt ourselves. All this stuff. But when the minute you recognize God, the minute that he's the one that you turn to in everything, he is going to take care of you. Now, it might not take care of you in the way you think he was going to take care of you, but he's going to take care of you. And when you look back, you say, wow, I sure got through that. And thank you, God. So it's just a matter, just like Moses trusted him, just like Aaron trusted him. You know, we read about in this next week's Torah portion, Acharei Mot, after the death. It goes back and talks about Aaron's 2 sons, and there were God's fire came down and killed them because of what they did. And we think about how terrible that is and all these other kinds of things. We'll talk about that next week. It's a very interesting concept. Not next week, the week after, because next week is the story of, again, of Passover. I wish I could think of the third thing I wanted to talk about, but I guess we're running out of time anyway. We started the hour talking about if somebody asks you what religion you are, you can tell them none, and it's okay. Because it has nothing to do with your belief and understanding and knowing who God is. Recognize and know. On the YouTube channel, Cher has done about 8 or 9 different talks about recognize and know. If Pharaoh had recognized and known who God was, he'd have saved himself a whole lot of grief and a whole lot of lives. But he said, no, I'm the God of all gods. I'm the one. I created everything, whatever. I want to end up with this, and then Terry, I'll give you a chance to say what you want to say. If somebody else has any comments, I've seen a few comments, but no more questions. And Deborah left, I guess. The main thing that you can do as an individual is keep looking forward, not backwards. It's great these people that keep knocking the Christians, and it's great the people that keep knocking the Muslims or Hindu or whoever, whatever they are. That takes away from you when you do that. You're wasting your time when you know I don't have to look back there, I need to look forward. And when you keep your eyes forward, you make the greatest advances inside yourself. Even if you've done things that you regret, or you've done things that you wring your hands over and wish you hadn't done them, forget it. God has already. He's moving you forward. He is leading you to freeing you from all this old stuff and moving you forward to have, look, what are we here on earth for? 70 years, 120 years, Bezrat Hashem, with his help. How much time is that compared to eternity? It's nothing. If we weren't here, time wouldn't be here, and God's not involved in time anyway. He's outside of it. You have eternity. So work right now where you are. Look at where you are and make yourself better where you are. And think of everything being good. And when things happen that aren't so good, say, okay, well, there's a lesson in here for me. And if you don't see the lesson, if you want to discuss something, get a hold of me, get a hold of Terry. We'll help you see what's happening in your life. We're not going to tell you what to do. We're not going to judge you. We're going to help you understand. You know, people go to psychologists their whole lives. A psychologist keeps a person looking backwards. Oh, what did I think when this? How did this person say to me back then? And they go through this story over and over again. When all that's past, you can't correct it, you can't change it. Let's go forward. How do we change who we are right now? How do we change what's going to happen to us in the future? And not be stuck in that same old thing. It reminds me of a young man that came to me and said, you know, I met this girl and she was this way. And I met another girl and she was like the other girl. And I met another girl and she was almost like the other girl. In other words, he wasn't changing his way of thinking of who he was meeting. He was choosing those women that he didn't want to marry and going in front of them. It's tough, but that's what he was doing. And actually, I've been counseling him for about 6 months now. I think he finally met a match that is going to go through. Because I stopped him from all the what-if thinking. So hopefully he's going to be married in the next couple of months. It's about time. He's 41. So that's about it for this week. Terry, what do you got to say?
Nothing. This another amazing class. Gives me a lot to think about.
Yeah, well, if anybody has questions or wants to get a hold of me during the week, you can do that. I'm here. I'm basically by the computer pretty much 24/6. Even when I'm in my office, the computer's open. I see the Facebook posts that come up. The only time I don't look at it is when I'm in prayer service and the few hours I sleep at night. So you're welcome, Marinella. Thank you so much. Veronica and Carla. Carla, you went through a time, but you know what? You're on the other side and you're going to be very happy where you are now. Things are going to be really good for you.
Oh, we were amazingly blessed with all of this, and the home is so much more than we could have hoped. And we were blessed financially that, I mean, this home is paid for. So every time I walk through it, I thank God for it.
Isn't that a nice feeling to live in a place where you know that you don't owe nobody nothing?
It's really hard to adjust to after 40 years of paying a mortgage that you don't have one due.
Well, I'm sure your bank account loves it. When we moved up here to Spot, we were making the case, should we rent or should we buy? Should we rent or should we buy? And I said, oh, the heck with it. Let's just buy. And we couldn't afford to live in the exact area where we wanted to live, so we're kind of halfway down the mountain. We could have rented up there, but I like knowing when I walk through my door, it's mine. It's just nobody can take it from me. Nobody can take it from my wife. Done deal. And if we're not around, it goes to the kids, to the grandkids. If whatever they do with it, I don't even care. I mean, God provided all this anyway. So it just gets passed on. Your wealth, folks, people's wealth has nothing to do with gold, has nothing to do with material things. This just popped in my head and I gotta pull it out real quick. It's short. I know we're out of time. This is written in the Yom Yom that the Jews read every day. And it says, Jewish wealth is not houses and gold. The everlasting wealth is being a Jew who keeps Torah and mitzvot and brings into the world children and grandchildren who keep Torah and mitzvot. Let's read it different. Noahide's wealth is not houses and gold. The everlasting Noahide wealth is bringing up Noahide children who know how to do the Torah that God wants them to do and the mitzvot that God wants them to do, and for them to bring children in the world and grandchildren to do the same thing. Simply, our wealth is not houses and gold. It's making sure that people we know have a relationship with the one true God without any hand twisting or anything else. I love talking to you guys. I enjoy it. I look forward to it every week. If anybody wants to get a hold of me or Terry, you know how to do it, either through Torah for the Nations, B'nai Noach Connection to Israel, or you know how to get a hold of us on Facebook. So thank you very much for being with us. And if you can, next week, I know there's other things going on at this time. I noticed this time William Hall started a class at the same time we did. I didn't think he ever did that before. But I don't care. Bring some people along next time, maybe. Get them involved. If there's somebody that just wants to ask some questions, bring them along. Let them ask questions. Tell them we're not going to try to convert them. We're not going to try to, because there's nothing to convert to. We're not converting them to another religion. We're just going to explain who God is. That's all. I guess that's it for this week. It's so great being with y'all.
Bye-bye.
See you next week.